Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of SaaS Leaders Lounge, and today we're joined by Jay Patil and Rusty Ralston, the founders of Swell, a venture partner in the US. Hi Jay, hi Rusty, how you doing?
Good, good.
Paris, hey there. Doing great. Thanks for having us on today.
Thank you.
How's the weather in New York at the moment?
It's a bit steamy and hot, but typical New York summer in the city.
Yes, it's nice to be in the city in the summer, but I'd much rather be on a beach somewhere. But just
Yeah,
just
sign
just
me up for
before
that too.
And just as we dive into it, Rusty and Jay, I just want to start by getting to know more about Swell and what you guys are doing in the market. So just to start with, I'd love to understand how you guys met, what led you to start Swell, and how those early days were for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, Paris. So Jay and I first met back in 2008 when we were both working at an AI NLP startup here in New York City. So we were some of the first employees. Jay was actually the first revenue hire. And the company was building technology to analyze, real-time conversations with salespeople to evaluate and assess them. So this is, way back in the day before kind of the AI infrastructure exists now. But we were building this company. The goal was to, really assess people, evaluate them, and help, on the recruiting side. So, not only were we kind of the first, employees of a startup, on that side, but we were building technology for founders of other startups and helping them recruit the best people in the country. So that's kind of where we got our start. Jay and I spent countless hours speaking with founders, understanding their challenges, helping them recruit amazing teams, interviewed thousands of candidates and placed, people at all kinds of tech startups, which kind of went on to become industry leaders and be acquired. So, this experience really for us defined kind of the trajectory of where we were headed and really shaped us. It kind of we saw the critical role that people play in the success of companies, and it really formed the basis of our investment thesis that startup success really comes from first and foremost the caliber of the founders, and also that early team that they attract.
Exciting. And I guess having both worked at that startup together, you were able to experience things on the other side of the table, working for an early stage startup, but also then working with those founders to hire that early talent. And we all know the importance of early hires and how, the margin for error is very small there. So in terms of in the early days, when you kind of shifted away from that startup, when did you decide that you wanted to do something groundbreaking and use that experiences to build Swell?
Yeah, so I think one of the most fortunate things in my life has been meeting Jay at this startup, and really finding a business partner and someone that is a life partner you can trust, and build something with is just like every company, the startups we back, it's the same. So I think Jay and I got our start there. The inspiration was really like seeing firsthand the impact of people on a startup success, and that really led to us. At the startup, we moved on from the startup. AI 15 years ago doing this was very, very early. So we kind of moved on from that. We were inspired to really put this philosophy of people determine the success of a company into practice. And so we wanted to help support visionary founders at their earliest stages and help them build extraordinary teams and put those things together. And so before we even took on a single LP, we actually like built this proof of concept fund from our recruiting revenue, and we wanted to prove it ourselves first before we thought that was really important. And that kicked things off. We invested in a company called Tapad here in New York City. We helped them hire over 40 people at a really amazing partnership, and still to this day with the founder, even though he started another company. They had a $360 million exit, helped him make over 40 hires, and we just saw that the impact we could have with companies, and that it would be much bigger of an impact if we raised a fund. So we started this. We saw this opportunity. And from there, it's been evolving from early employees at a startup first to angel investor proof of concept fund and recruiting to a fund one, and now fund two. So it's been just amazing the journey, and really to just partner with so many extraordinary founders. I mean, that's really the crux of everything we do. And fortunately, that's led to some you know, DPI for our investors. It's led to, you know, having our first portfolio company kind of hit unicorn status and some acquisitions and just the, you know, the sense that, you know, we belong here and we can build a top tier venture franchise.
I guess something when I speak to founders, whether that's AI founders, cybersecurity, CRM founders, whatever the software is, I guess the common thing at that very early stage they talk about is, you know, talent, hiring the right people that understand their mindset, their culture, you know, what is required to succeed at that level. And we all know when you're in a company with 20 or 15 people, you're going to wear many hats. You're going to have to change directions many times. And some people, they're built for that. That's what they're born to do. Others, you know, maybe they benefit from coming in a little bit later down the line where they've been able to demonstrate success of growing a company from 50 million to 200 million ARR, etc. And I know you guys have a statement that you say you win with people, and that's something that's, you know, been demonstrated across the industry. So just wanted to ask you now, how how have you been able to implement that philosophy with the customers in those early days and really identify the type of people each company needs? Because I guess every founder is different, etc.
That's a great question, Paris. I mean, I think, you know, like Rusty said, our experience at this early AI startup was really transformative in helping us like embrace, recognize, and really like take to the next level this like people first investment philosophy, right? Like evaluating thousands of founders, helping them build great teams, kind of give us a front row seat and help really calibrate our brains into understanding what separates the good from the great, right? So at this AI startup, while we were building products for founders and assessing, you know, talent and helping them build teams, what it really gave us was this framework, kind of a formula, if you will, to recognize startup DNA in people. Um, and that has really been core to kind of informing everything we do at Swell today, right? We firsthand saw how successful companies were inevitably led by world-class founders who attracted world-class talent, right? It's that flywheel, talent flywheel that builds great, you know, durable companies in the long term. So in evaluating startups, how that's informed us is like we really, our primary focus is the founder. That's where it really begins, right? We go deep into assessing not just their professional backgrounds. This isn't about resumes and keywords and what companies they worked at, but what are the inner drives and motivations? Like as a human being, as a person, right? What do they want to achieve in life? Do they have an ability to tell a compelling story, get others excited about joining their mission? It's that talent magnet ability, right? To us, the team is the thing that separates the startups because the stage that Rusty and I invest in. Now, there's a lot of different stages to venture. What we do is the earliest possible stage of venture, which is pre-seed and seed investments. And there's no data. Everything is unknown. All you know is the person, right? So in summary, like our win with people is not just kind of a catchy phrase, but it's become our mantra because we've seen it play out time and time again. And it's not just something we say, it's just a core principle that drives every investment we've made, all the way from our proof of concept fund 0 to fund 1. We've been constantly kind of honing our judgment when it comes to recognizing that DNA in people and continue evolving our thesis now with fund 2 as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just going to deviate a little bit from talent. We're going to come back to that in a moment. But you talk about your first interaction with these, you know, organizations. This starts with the founder, right? And then you look at the other aspects. But I want to ask, in a situation where, you know, you have a highly intelligent founder with, you know, maybe even previous exits and successes, if the product isn't quite there, what is your take on that? You know, the product needs to stand up in the market as well. So how do you help them to sharpen that message and make sure that if you're not quite sure if it's going to go to the market and has a big enough market to succeed, how are you able to align with the founders on that?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Rusty. I think you take this.
I was going to say, you know, the best founders have a nose for finding the biggest market and being in the right markets, right? Because an incredible founder in a small market is not going to equate a huge winner, right? Same with product. You know, the most top tier, you know, of elite founders themselves as founders and the people they attract are absolutely like maniacally obsessed with their customer. And with that, they tend to build products that, serve the market in amazing ways. So we just believe that, when you have the founder first and you get that right, then they really are the person that can drive the company into the right market, the biggest market, and execute on the product, for delivering solutions to the customer.
And in relation to some of the recent companies you've worked with, like Tapad, Science.io, and Crisp, you guys operate in a sector that's, should I say, agnostic of the sector. So it doesn't matter what it is, you can kind of work with those founders. So in such a diverse field, how are you able to really find the best talent for them? If, you're maybe today working with an AI company, tomorrow you're working with, a clean tech company. How are you able to build such a network? Because obviously talent is a USP of you guys to be able to help the founders to grow with the right talent.
I'm glad you asked that because there is quite a diversity right now. All the investments we make do tend to be primarily B2B software focused. So there is kind of a guiding umbrella, if you will. But they're very diverse industries, right? It could be space tech to fintech to solving and reimagining the food supply chain, right? To cybersecurity for enterprise AI to healthcare AI. So yes, there has been a broad mix of companies. For us now, Rusty and I met at this startup where we were serving founders and we were obsessive about solving their problems. This is, like we mentioned, 16 years ago. So we have a massive network of just people in tech and founders in tech and those employees and those early hires we've helped, dozens, 50 plus companies make, in our time at that AI startup. So network is key, but I think that's just a starting point. That's very foundational. And then, you get 1 degree, 2 degrees separation away from an immediate network. We built a phenomenal process around just like extracting the most value from that network. But we see that as just a starting layer because we believe when it comes to recruiting, it's not about who you know, it's about who you don't know. It's about unearthing talent pools that are otherwise just not visible, not just to us, but also to the founders themselves, right? And so what we've gotten really good at is developing a framework, again, an approach and a process to unearth those candidates that are a couple of degrees away from us by looking at the markets that the founders are looking to reimagine, right? Whatever that industry might be, whatever that market might be, look for adjacent markets because what we focus on truly is those category creating, those like one of one, right? N of one type startups. There are no priors. There are no comparisons. No other company exists that has solved that particular problem in a meaningful way, in an established manner. And so we look for at really mapping the ecosystem and look at adjacent markets where maybe similar companies have successfully gone 0 to 1 and solved maybe similar thematic problems. And then we identified those early hires of those companies that did that 0 to 1 work and then engage them in meaningful conversations, which sometimes take weeks, months, sometimes even years to attract the best talent to our portfolio companies. And so it's not just about who we know, but also about how we leverage who we know to get to the people that we don't know in the most effective way.
Thanks for sharing that. And I guess strategic partnerships play a crucial role in the company's growth as well as the portfolio company's growth as well. I know Science.io, if I'm right, was recently acquired. I'd love you to tell me just a bit about some specific strategies that you guys implement with companies like Science.io that are instrumental in their successful exits, because that's what, VCs work for, their investors and also the founders, right? To get to the point where companies want to buy their product because it's no longer a nice to have, but it's a must have.
Yeah, absolutely. So, healthcare is definitely an area that we've been excited about for a long time. The industry is massive. It's slow moving. It's ripe for disruption, but it's also complex and highly regulated. So, having some sort of insider view is key. We were really attracted to Science.io because the founders had that rare combination of, deep domain insider expertise, but this outsider's mindset on how to transform an industry. And I think that's kind of a common thread you'll see. But Will and Gaurav, the founders, had spent years building solutions for healthcare AI at Foundation Medicine. So they really understood the challenges around the data interoperability and how to structure clinical information. And at the same time, they saw this opportunity to build a platform that could intelligently process any biomedical text and extract insights at scale. So it was a pretty ambitious company, but really uniquely positioned to execute on it. And we partnered from really from day one when we invested, all the way through acquisition, and that was in really helping him then in many ways, whether it was fundraising, we helped him raise millions of dollars, whether that was kind of embedding ourselves in the team and spending time with them at their office, talking through strategy and direction, and also through like helping assess and evaluate people and building the team. So you just have a really tight partnership, and that's led to, I think, a common thread, which is just being very close with the founders we work with. We're on a WhatsApp thread or a text thread with every founder we back. You name it, whatever the problem is, whether it's just like I had a long day and want to go have a drink with Jay and Rusty in the East Village, or it's let's talk through the strategy of fundraising or how to go to market, or building up building and structuring that fundraising process. So that's been really really cool, and that's kind of the partnership we desire with every portfolio company, and it helps that companies like that are so ahead of the curve. I mean, we invested in science in an LLM company almost 5 years ago. It wasn't quite as common as it is now, but we were proud to be ahead of the curve on that one, with such an incredible team and incredible founders. Really fortunate.
A question when founders are looking at investment is what value add services will this VC be able to provide to us? So, alongside integrating talent within the portfolio customers, what would you say differentiates Swell from some of the other pre-seed and seed VCs in the market at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Swell, recruiting is our DNA, right? Like this is how Rusty and I started our friendship and met at this company. I was entirely focused on that, right? It's not an afterthought. It's not something we outsource. It's an area we go deeper on probably than any seed fund that we've come across. It's our superpower. It's a core part of who we are. When you talk about the differentiator, I think think about it, it's a judgment that we've honed over the last 15 plus years now, in recognizing that greatness in people. How many VCs or heads of talent platforms, do you know who've spent 4+ years building tech, right, while being obsessed about solving the hardest problem for founders and building tech to do that, which is assessing people and building great teams. I think that's what really sets us apart. It's that level of hustle. It's a real kind of personal obsession. It's an involvement. It's a commitment. A lot of VCs like to talk about the talent platforms, and they do add some value, but it tends to be more marketing than substance. And they might share some candidate resumes, throw them over the fence, make a few intros, but they're not truly in the weeds and haven't been obsessing about this problem particularly, right, where we met at a startup looking to solve that problem. And yes, we talked about the sourcing part, right? The immediate kind of network, extensive, massive network that we've been building over the last 15+ years, and how we expand upon that to get to the people that we don't know. But sourcing is just the beginning. What we really do with the founders is roll up our sleeves in the recruiting process itself. So we encourage our founders to treat hiring not just as a sales process, or rather, it's not just a recruiting process, but it's actually a sales process. Right? Everything from the initial outreach to closing the candidate should be approached with the same rigor and intensity that you as a founder would while landing a massive enterprise contract, right, when you're selling a product. To that end, we're in the trenches with our founders every step of the way. We help them think about the process itself, design the process. We, as they need us, we get involved in the process. We craft compelling outbound emails for them, while we'll create those target lists of those adjacent markets and those target companies that the best person could potentially come from when they're looking to make the next big hire. Right? We'll actually sit on interviews. We'll conduct the interviews ourselves. We'll debrief on the candidates with the founders to recalibrate who they should be looking for. We'll even get on the phone and close critical hires, right? Even if we weren't involved in the process ourselves. And yes, we've codified a lot of these learnings And we have this kind of Swell Sync recruiting playbook that Rusty and I put together on paper, and kind of put our thoughts, 15 years of what we've been building on paper. But it's not just like handing a PDF over to the founder. Yes, it's a start to finish guide, but we also work hand in hand and help execute with them along the way.
Wow, that's astonishing. I guess as a founder, that gives a lot of reassurance and confidence that you're with the right people there. So that's amazing to hear. And I guess having worked across many different sectors, I just want to find out what is some of the core criteria that you use to identify if it's a defining product in a category that maybe hasn't even been defined yet. Gartner comes out and they say, okay, this product, we don't have such a market for it now, but it's so big and we predict it to grow that we're going to create this category now.
Yeah, good question, Paris. At Swell, every Swell investment comes down to the caliber of the founders and the potential for their business to create and define a market, like you said. And so we're really focused mainly on B2B infrastructure, which includes AI, software, and sectors like healthcare space, commerce, and others. And to sum it up, one of our Ravin, one of our portfolio founders, was like, "Oh yeah, Swell invest in the stuff that matters," and I think that's a good way to sum up what we do. But you mentioned the criteria. We look at a lot of criteria, and here are a few of them. Like one of them is the founder, market kind of opportunity fit, right? Like, is this an authentic founder who has a unique insight into the problem they're solving? And do they have a vision for creating an entirely new market, not just incrementally improving an existing one or existing solution, right? And I think the thing that many people miss is beyond that, are they obsessed with their idea that they can't imagine working on anything else? And are they obsessed with solving a customer's problem? Like they have to have that type of burning desire. So we really look for that, and get into the person, to the background, even like their youth, they're growing up, like how that's all, led and shaped them, the chips on the shoulder they have. Another one is more around the market and category, and, is asymmetric upside. If the company wins, can they become massive? We're hunting for companies that have that like 100, X plus potential. And this means, huge untapped markets where a winner could capture significant value. And so we're less interested in companies that are, one of 30 competitors that are, nice to have products that, definitely can be amazing businesses, but they tend not to be as great of a fit for Swell. And then the last thing I think, of the criteria that I'll mention, at least on this call, is that on this podcast, is that, what kind of like insider earned secrets do they have? Does this team know something that others don't that gives them an advantage? And this could come, really from a deep technical expertise. It could come from, having like unique customer insights, or, being able to solve complexity where others, can't. Or it might just come from like a very untraditional go-to-market approach. But there needs to be some sort of, unique insight and edge. And, some of these criteria have led us to some non-obvious bets that ended up creating new categories. So like an example of that is Loft Orbital. Loft Orbital is a space infrastructure as a service company. We invested, at seed and pre-product. So there's no satellites in space, and we invested. Nobody was really talking about space infrastructure as a service, but the founders had this vision for what they could do, and really just making spaces incredibly complex and making it very simple for enterprises and governments and entities to access space. And they had the founder caliber qualities that we look for in helping build Spire from scratch, another space tech company that eventually IPO'd. They had this idea in this massive market. They had the track record to really nail it and execute on it, and they had these earned secrets that that they knew about the industry. So fast forward today, they've really defined and created their own category, and they're industry leader with over 100 million in revenue. And it really kind of right away on that first call, I think Jay and I saw these founders and what they were building embodied what we look to do, and the partners we like to form lifelong partnerships with as well.
Thanks. And that seems to be quite a comprehensive criteria. It needs to be, right, if you're investing in a company that hasn't got, massive amounts of historical data to go by. But when you are investing in these companies and you're looking at these different criterias, obviously no company is going to tick every box 100%. So how are you able to kind of score these when you're looking through the different criterias? How many need to be ticked? Because as you said, sometimes you go into an opportunity and you still, it's not clearly defined, but you in your heart you have that gut feeling that it's something that's going to work. How do you kind of define if you're going to invest in the founder and the company, if half of the criteria is ticked and half isn't?
That's a great question. I think, you bring up a good point because when you're in this stage of venture, it's hard to it's hard to like realize like, okay, it's not all a pattern, right? Like no two founders look the same, right? And no two exceptional founders, right, have built the world's most valuable companies look the same either, right? So this isn't necessarily checking off boxes, right? It is a framework to say, okay, do the ingredients exist, right, for this to be a truly impactful company? Do the ingredients exist? Is this the right formula for success? And I think what we've been able to, Rusty, now over the years, and this is 16 plus years in the making, is kind of refine a list of things we look for. So yes, there is a list, right? There's some key attributes that we look for in early stage founders. The big question, if you were to like sum it up in one question, is like, why is this instance of this problem, this industry, the founder themselves, like this makes like, what is it that's making this startup that founder's life's work, right? And what's going to allow them to really win in a meaningful way. So to break it down, when it comes to the founders, there are a few things we look for. It's deep domain expertise. And I think Rusty's alluded to this before. It's that founder market fit. They know the space inside out. It's that insider secret plus outsider mentality, right? And sometimes they've been experiencing those problems directly by working in the industry or building a previous startup in that space, because we want them to live and breathe the problems that they're solving for. Secondly, just at the founder level, it's a raw horsepower, that intellectual horsepower. It's the ability to learn and execute quickly, because we know that startups, things are moving at a blistering pace. Founders need to be able to make smart decisions with limited information, right? They're constantly leveling up their skills, be it areas like product, sales, marketing, recruiting, fundraising, right? It's never good enough. I think it's the founders that imbue those qualities. They're constantly trying to better themselves and up their game, right? Are they great at storytelling, right? It has to be an infectious ability to rally people to a bigger cause than just themselves. The early team members, right? There's early hires that Rusty and I do get involved in recruiting. The early customers, those early investors, they're all buying into a future that doesn't even exist yet, right? And I think it comes down to the founders being able to kind of paint this vivid, compelling, exciting picture to recruit others to kind of join them in making this vision a reality. We've discussed just this obsessive, like maniacal focus on solving customers' problems, right? Better than anyone else on the planet. The best founders do have this deep customer empathy that we look for. They're constantly seeking feedback. Again, they're not leading with products, they're leading with an obsession, right, to solving the problem. And that's what leads to the best products. They're not measuring themselves by internal goals and revenue metrics. They're measuring themselves and grading themselves by the impact that they're having on the ultimate user and the buyer and the problems that they're solving for them. Another thing we look for at the founder level is that resilience. It's that grit. It's that indomitable spirit that they need, right, in the face of setbacks. Like these early stage startups are brutally hard, right? Rarely do things go to plan, ever. So we look for founders who persevere and use these challenges as fuel, for their fire. The tougher the things get, the harder they work. So those are some of the qualities, that I would sum up as it goes way beyond, the company that the founders worked at, or what school did they go to, or, what networks did they come from.
And I guess both of you, having worked with a lot of founders even before you started Swell to develop products and go to market strategies, you would have been involved in that continuous product market fit discussion and making sure that as they have their beta customers and then start to transition to more enterprise customers, that they understand, the common challenges that those customers are facing and are able to adapt their products to that. Would you say that that's something that you guys are heavily involved in and continuously drive with, those founders, the importance of continuing to focus on the product market fit and how the requirements continue to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it is, having that type of partnership, and mapping the biggest problems and biggest opportunities to people and how to solve those most effectively, right? Because there's only going to be a handful of hires at the company early on that, that are continually, you're making these key hires for someone to own something, right? And that is the company's biggest problem or opportunity, right? And so we really partner in that way, really focused on that, because if you can get down to that core level, of the team and unlocking, the next level of growth, right? Then that's incredibly important for the company. And you're right in that things do evolve and change. And I think, one of these common characteristics of all of these companies that, that I think you can see why they're successful in what they do is that, startups, there's so much change. Every day is different. Every month is different. Your journey in the first year is different than your journey in the second year. Your, 0 to 1 kind of value creation is different. 0 to 1 million in revenue is different from 1 to 3 is different from, getting to 10 to getting to 20 to getting to 50 to 100 million. So it is, I think some of the best entrepreneurs, see this. We partner with them to address these things and scale and grow. And they also understand, I think, uniquely that the team always has to evolve. And when you kind of map that back to the people building the company, some people are incredible at that, just day one phase of the company. Some are better, on that next journey, which is the next leg, which is getting it to, from 1 to 3 million, let's say, and then in scaling. So I think some of the best founders really understand, and we partner with them on that, is that there's always these changes with the team, right? And some people that founders hire make that journey from day one through IPO or acquisition, right? Some are best suited for an earlier place in the company, and some are best suited for, a growth phase in the company. So I think that having that sort of flexibility and understanding of what it's going to take to scale and grow is something that we love to partner with in companies as they evolve. And also I think that kind of just a factor that, sets some of these companies apart.
Great. And I'm cautious. I want to ask this question, but I know it can be a podcast of its own, which is, what are your takes on product-led growth versus revenue-led growth? Obviously, that depends on the, portfolio customer and what they're trying to achieve. But do you have any preferences, and have you seen one play out better than the other? Or?
I think that Jay and I are more both and type of people than either or type of people. And I think we've seen the most success from our portfolio companies with ones that take an approach that is both going from, the top and bottom simultaneously, and, being able to build and scale and talk to, Fortune 100 companies, as well as, being able to have some sort of product-led growth engine where, you have, kind of that mid-market, if you will, self-adopting. So, I think that in an ideal world, you do have, an approach that that evolves and focuses on both instead of just purely one or the other. We like founders that are malleable in that way, right? Like they're not like diehard. Oh, this has to be this. We like that kind of like, oh, we want to build the biggest company. We want to build a company that solves the industry's deepest problems. And to do that, at least Jay and I have been, fortunate to work with entrepreneurs that really kind of look at it from both angles, whether, it starts in one and involves the other, or vice versa, depending on which one they start with. I think that sort of viewpoint is one that we align ourselves with, like in what we really like in founders.
Thanks. Thanks for your take on that. And over the last decade, the tech space, especially in the US, has changed significantly. What changes would you say, Jay and Rusty, you've observed in the ecosystem, and how have you both been able to adapt to these changes to help your customers to favorable outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, New York has changed so much since Jay and I were, at the startup where we met, right? Like, and we were venture backed. We were backed by John Elton, who's now at Greycroft, and Jeff Judge at Inovia Capital, and we shared an office with a New York VC and are friends with other New York VCs 15 years ago. So we've seen, from working at that startup, we've just seen the New York tech ecosystem just change in like immense ways, and it's been incredible. I mean, New York City is like the place to build a company, and that's been very excited to see. The city is loaded with just incredible talent, incredible people on both the tech side, engineering side, and also the business side in a variety of different industries. We've seen that with companies that we've backed that are, in the Bay Area or other parts of the country that, moved to New York, opened New York offices. And we've seen people, come from Silicon Valley and start companies here and decide to choose New York as the place to start a company. And that's become just so common now. Whereas before, you would have VCs that would tell a founder like, I'm not working with you unless you're starting the company in the Bay Area, and that's just completely changed now. So New York, now there's so much insider knowledge on how to build and scale companies. There's been so many exits and IPOs happen in the past 20 years, and then I just think if you move to New York, you just by nature have the grit and tenacity to make things happen. And Jay and I we love that about New York. We're New Yorkers, so I think that's really cool. And then with that, this is like a advertisement for New York City tech, but with that, like New York is like the pulse of the world. I mean, it's incomparable, and it's not just I think when people are starting companies here, you're just not surrounded by 100% tech all the time, 24/7, and I think that's great. It's like you're talking to people in all kinds of industries. There's much more openness and creativity. And so I think for us, we've just seen so many changes in New York. We love it here. And we just think the tech landscape in New York is just getting started. I mean, to what it can become. So there's so many investors here. There's so many amazing founders. There's so many people who have helped build companies that just had an amazing amount of change. And it's one that, we're really excited and proud to be a part of.
Great. And just to clarify, I know you guys do a lot of investment in the US, but if there was, an amazing European or Israeli startup that was looking for funding, would you say the doors are still open for companies that are outside of the US?
Yeah, that's a great question because we're not a New York only fund. Like half our investments are in New York, the other half are very evenly spread across the West Coast. We have investments in also other cities like Milwaukee, right, in Wisconsin. We have investments. When we first invested in Science, it's actually a Boston-based company that did relocate and move to New York. We have an investment in Austin, right? We recently, out of Fund 2, invested a couple of founders out of Madrid in Spain that are building for the US market and establishing a strong presence here in the e-commerce tech space. And then our most recent investment, the CTO was actually a Tel Aviv-based founder, right? That's also building for the US market. So for us, it's like that, like New York embodies like that spirit and the tenacity and like that creativity we look for. But we also know like the best people are everywhere, right? So we'll go where the best founders are.
Thanks for that. And I guess just on the note of fundraising and growth, I just want, if you could just talk to us about the current funds you guys have going at the moment, the investment opportunities that you're working on maybe, and just to understand what the kind of ideal size of investment is that you look at when you're investing in founders and companies for people that are listening.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have an amazing LP based. It's LP based. It's all individuals and also kind of family offices of successful founders and startup executives who build companies from scratch, from 0 to 1. That's most of our LP base. We've had, let's say, more than half of our LPs from Fund One return and invest in Fund Two, and almost every one of them that made that leap from one to two have either 2x to 10x the commitments second time around in Fund Two. Uh, and the other half of the Fund 2 LPs are new LPs, but they all came through word of mouth. They were all referrals from Fund 1 LPs who have seen us operate at the level that we did with Fund 1 and now are even more excited about what we continue to build with Swell. This is like the power of compounding in full display here, right? And I think that's what's been the most exciting part. It's not some secret sauce to this growth here. It's very organic. It's very real. It's just people aligning with who Rusty and I are as individuals, as people, and as investors. And they like to see that investor mindset. It is about playing long-term games with long-term people. Now, we're actually in the process of wrapping up the final close for Fund 2. And it's going to be a huge step up. It's not an official announcement yet, so I'm not going to put any numbers out there, but it's going to be a huge step up from Fund 1 and Fund 2, not just only in fund size, but also in the average check size into every investment is now more than tripled from Fund 1 to Fund 2.
That's exciting times ahead, I guess. And in terms of if a founder was looking for funding, what types of, amounts are in this fund that's open at the moment? What is the kind of check size that they would be looking at for investment?
Oh yeah, our investments right now range out of Fund 2. We're actively started deploying a little over a year ago. We made, half a dozen investments already. Check sizes have ranged anywhere from 500K to 800K, with the average sitting somewhere around $600,000 per investment.
Amazing. And
primarily
just
in pre-seed and seed rounds.
and what if you invested at pre-seed round, if they came back at seed round and needed investment, is it common that those portfolio customers would always come to you first, and are you usually going to reinvest in them at that stage again? Depending on if the fund's open,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, of course. No, we've allocated some of our funds for follow-on, and then we have an incredible, LP base that we've had come on board with our portfolio companies and invest millions in their follow-on rounds too. So it's kind of a both end scenario there with our LP base, and actually reserving some for follow-on as well.
Amazing. And now I just want to ask you some of the biggest lessons and challenges you've both faced from, 15, 16 years ago when you started Swell until today. What have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned and challenges you faced?
I would say the challenges have been that we're outsiders, right? When Rusty and I getting into VC as outsiders, while it's been a challenge, it's also given us this drive. We have a chip on our shoulder, right? And we have a lot to prove. It requires a lot of grit, a lot of patience, right? You have to stick to it. You have to be disciplined, and you have to believe in our ability to be a great judge of business and people. And we're slowly starting to see that come full circle and start to yield results. Right? Venture is a very long game. We've seen that with multiple exits now that we've had, both across a proof of concept fund and also with our second exit in Fund 1, with Science.io being the most recent one. We realized our first DPI. We actually were able to return capital, right, as a result of an acquisition to our LPs. And that's a huge moment for us as emerging fund managers. It was our first DPI moment, just happened in March of this year with the Science exit. And while it wasn't a massive exit, they were acquired for $140 million. It was a good exit. It drove significant DPI because we have a concentrated portfolio construction strategy. So we don't like to spray and pray our capital across, 30, 40, 50 companies. We have a very concentrated portfolio strategy. And now that strategy is also now proving to be a good one and yielding the right results. Because at the end of the day, we are in the game of returning capital, right, to our LPs. And when you think of, lessons, I mean, we've learned a lot from Fund 1, and we put that into practice in Fund 2. We learned a lot from Fund 0, and we put that into practice in Fund 1. So I feel like refining and our strategy, the evolution of our strategy will continue to happen for decades to come. And the learning never stops.
For us all, the learning never stops and it needs to keep going. But just before we get to the quick fire questions and a question from our last guest, I want to ask an important question. What impact do you both hope to have on the startup and VC communities in the long term, and what legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's a little early for us to, talk legacy, but I think just the goal is always the same, for us. It's work with the best entrepreneurs on the planet, best founders. It's to deliver top tier returns, deliver capital back to our LPs, and to leave, a positive mark on the planet while we're here. So I think, that's really what we're focused on is those things. And hopefully, when it's all said and done, we do leave a legacy with the founders that we worked with the LPs, and they're really, I think everyone's really proud of what we do, because the whole Swell circle is tight knit, and we're aligning with these LPs for our lifetime. We're aligning with these founders for our lifetime.
Well, I continue to wish you both the best and everyone involved with Swell. And just as we move to the quick fire questions, I'd like to ask the first question, which is, what is something people don't know about you, Rusty?
Good question. One thing people don't know about me is that I got my start in the music business. Worked at Creative Artists Agency, huge agency. Worked in Nashville, Tennessee, in the rock department with an agent. We represented John Mayer and Kings of Leon and My Morning Jacket and bands like that. And even though I don't, obviously work, in anything music related now, I do produce music on the side just for fun. It's a hobby.
Nice. What type of music, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's mostly, it's mostly working with a bunch of musicians and artists in Kingston, Jamaica. So it tends to be, around Jamaican music.
Nice. And Jay, what would you say is your favorite holiday destination?
That's a tough one. I grew up in India, and so I mean, right now I would say I love the islands, man. Give me some sunshine, give me a beach. Um, you know, put me anywhere with give me a rum cocktail and some sunshine, some oysters. I'm in a good place. Uh,
A nice
and I kind of
conservative.
grew up in a very yeah, and where I grew up in India. I mean, I grew up working in my dad's kitchen. He had a small fast food restaurant that was making Chinese food, Chinese Indian food in Mumbai, right? And my dad also spent 7 years uh, breeding show dogs that were imported from Germany. So we had to learn like German commands because we were importing these German shepherds. So like it's always been this like weird kind of mix of like insider outsider mindset, like cooking Chinese food in India, breeding German shepherds in India, right? And that's kind of always been, and it's been a driving force to kind of where I ultimately ended up with meeting Rusty and getting into venture.
I agree, but I must say, like the Chinese Indian fusion food is becoming more and more popular. Major cities, they pop up everywhere. So it's something that people definitely love. And to whoever wants to take this next question, who is an idol of yours and why?
It's an idol of mine. An idol of mine is, I mean, probably number one is my father. And really fortunate to have incredible parents. If I can, my dad is just incredibly influential on me. All my friends love to hang out with my dad. Like he's the number one, the number one, favorite person. But but yeah, just the example that of integrity, character, business mind, um, outworking, overachieving, those types of things that really inspire me. So my dad's definitely my idol.
Great answer. And I guess both your parents would be proud of what you're achieving today and continue to achieve over time. And just the last question is, when you was growing up as a young child, I know for many of us, what we wanted to do growing up is not what we do today. What did you want to be as a young child?
I
Do
saw
you,
my dad, my mom, like starting over half a dozen businesses as a kid. I mentioned the restaurants, the hotel, the dog breeding, that an ad agency, and I think I just knew that I wanted to be like them, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some sort. I hadn't found what that thing was going to be. It took me to being a bit older and getting mature and getting knocked down and, being an immigrant from India to the US and starting things and trying things on my own to realize what, I think it was all came together when Rusty and I met and we saw that partner in each other to build something amazing with. I think that's what I grew up thinking. It's like, man, I want this partnership. I want to build something, and not necessarily the same thing that my mom and dad built because they were each other's business partners. But I wanted to find that spirit in someone that could go build something new with.
I agree. Having a co-founder that you have that, chemistry with is important, that you believe, your skills complement each other is always important. And as we go to the last section of the podcast, I have to ask you our question from the last guest, which is, if you hired somebody on, the topic of loved ones, if, a loved one joined your company, it was an early stage business. Initially, they reported to yourself. As the company grows, now they have a new line manager. Maybe things aren't going so well. What would you do?
That's a great question. It's always tricky when there's family members, or really close friends and building companies. Ultimately, people have to perform and have to, grow the business, first and foremost. I mean, so we've definitely seen some examples of founders hiring, family or people that are close and not performing, and ultimately doesn't work out, right? So it is a pretty tricky, scenario to navigate. But at the end of the day, you have to look at, what's best for the business, and then, navigate that relationship, in a really, tender way, in a real way, to get the best out of that person, and to kind of not make it as personal. It can become very, very personal when you have, those things mixed together. So it's a bit of a delicate situation to get through.
So to give an answer, would you try to find a medium, or would you, if they weren't happy and if things weren't working out, would you simply just, come to an agreement that it's best to part ways?
Yeah, you have to part ways with someone if it's not working out. It doesn't matter if they're, if they're your brother, or, there's someone that you met on from the first day that you have no relationship with. It's like, you either help build the company and you're advancing the business, or not. And you have to really separate, those things.
Much agreed. And
Yeah, I
what
think
would be a
as a
question?
founder,
Yeah, sorry, Jay.
yeah, good. So no, I think as a founder, the key thing is to like always focus on, that person in the role being the best person for their job, right? If you look at everything through that lens, is this the best person for this role at this time, in the company? What are our goals, and is this person helping us get there? Right? It just comes down to the business and what's best for the business.
I agree. And what would be a question that you would like to share for our next guest?
Good question. Or your next guest.
Yeah, it's hard with
What
context.
what are what was the most challenging part of your life, and how did that impact your motivation and what you're doing now?
Well, thanks for sharing that. I will be on the next episode. But I want to thank you both, Jay and Rusty, for joining me today, sharing your insights, your experiences, and your thoughts on the market moving forward. Just for anyone that is, in the spaces that you operate, that may be looking for investment, is there any upcoming events that you guys are hosting or will be, attending, for them to be able to network with yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Follow us on, connect. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, also Twitter or X, and we definitely do events here in the city and around. So we'd love to connect in person, for sure.
And is there any announcements that may be released ahead of time, or is there anything that you want to share with the audience about things that Swell are doing at the moment?
Yeah, we're excited to, pretty soon, as we mentioned, we're Fund 2 is happening. We have some really exciting news with portfolio companies raising subsequent rounds. Some pretty insane growth in terms of revenue, and the amount of, the size of these rounds that we're just glad to be a part of, as these companies have matured. So a lot of exciting things happening, on our end here as well.
Well, again, thanks for joining me on the SaaS Leaders Lounge. I really hope the back end of 2024 goes well for you and everyone involved in Swell. And until next time, bye bye now.